Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive.
Yeah.
This time, we're going to be talking about something that's pretty interesting and kind of complex, and that's ancient Greece. And we're going to be focusing on homosexuality in that society.
Right.
And this is using an academic text that you shared with me.
Yes.
And I'm really excited to talk about this because I feel like a lot of people, when they think about this topic, they just think about, Sappho and Socrates. And
yes. Just those like super famous figures.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think
the big names.
the big names,
Yeah.
we're going to go beyond those big names.
That's accurate.
And really get to the heart of
Yeah.
everyday Greek life.
Yeah. And that's actually what is so cool about this approach.
Yeah.
Is it shifts the focus away from those
Right.
popular figures.
Celebrities.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you wanted to understand modern dating,
Right.
would you just look at celebrity couples? No. You'd want to see how everyday people navigate relationships and like what are the unspoken rules?
Right.
What are the everyday experiences?
Yes.
And that's exactly what we're doing here.
It's like looking at the tip of the iceberg and thinking you understand the whole ocean.
Exactly.
And we're good to go.
We're diving deep.
We're going deep under the surface.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
just like any society,
Yeah.
ancient Greece had its own, sets of rules and norms.
Oh, yeah.
And you might be surprised to learn that Athenian law regarding male prostitution was pretty unique.
Yes. This is very interesting.
Yeah.
So instead of focusing on the buyer of sexual services, the law actually targeted the seller.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And this kind of flips the script
Yeah.
on how we typically view these types of laws.
Yeah,
And I think it reveals a very different perspective on the power dynamics at play.
totally.
And we even have a real-life example of this that brings it to life.
Oh, really?
There's a story about an orphan named Diophantos.
Right. And he actually took legal action after a foreigner didn't pay him for services rendered.
Wait a minute. So this wasn't just some law on the books.
It was a reason.
People were actually
People were using it.
using this to settle disputes.
Yes, exactly.
Wow. Okay, so that says a lot about how embedded this was in their society. So then how did they
Well, that's a great question.
differentiate between what we might consider prostitution
Right.
and then more
Yeah.
genuine relationships?
Genuine, more
Acceptable.
acceptable. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where the concept of dikaios eros comes in.
Okay.
Or legitimate eros.
Okay.
And this term was used by a man named Aiskins during a trial.
Okay.
And he was actually defending his own homosexual relationships.
Interesting.
Yeah. So he was arguing that these relationships were acceptable
Okay.
because they weren't based on money or exploitation or coercion.
So it was all about genuine feelings.
Exactly.
Okay. That was the key distinction.
So if genuine feelings were the key,
Mm-hmm.
did that mean Aiskins avoided physical intimacy altogether to keep it legitimate?
That's a great question. And the sources don't give us a clear-cut answer on the specifics of physical intimacy in these dikaios eros relationships.
Oh,
There's this ambiguity
okay.
that surrounds this aspect.
Well,
And you can almost sense Aiskins himself wrestling with
right.
how to reconcile his own experiences with the expectations of his time.
Yeah, they were trying to figure out where the boundaries were.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
And what's even more interesting is that
What's that?
the source material points out that the ancient Greeks didn't even have separate vocabularies for heterosexual and homosexual desire.
Exactly.
They use the same words.
Yeah.
Arum and eros and epithemia.
Yeah, regardless of gender.
It's so wild.
It's wild. Yeah. It's
Imagine trying to understand their world through our modern lens of gay versus straight.
Right.
It just doesn't fit.
It doesn't work.
Their understanding of desire was much more fluid and nuanced.
Yeah.
And it really challenges us to rethink our own assumptions about how we categorize relationships.
I mean, we have to chuck our 21st century relationship labels in the window if we want to even begin to try to understand this.
Yes, totally.
So we talked about, these relationships and how they were viewed. But there was this place called the Palaestra.
The Palaestra, yes.
That was very important in the lives of young men and
yes.
their relationships with older men.
Right. So the Palaestra was essentially a wrestling school
Okay.
But it wasn't just about physical training.
Gotcha.
It was a vital social space for upper-class boys.
Okay.
Where they received their education.
And importantly, they interacted with older men.
Okay, so I can already see where this is going.
You can imagine, right?
Yeah.
In that setting, amidst the sweat and physicality, there was definitely potential for...
More than just wrestling.
More than just wrestling to occur.
Okay, so it wasn't just modern gyms where those glances get exchanged.
Right, exactly.
But was there any evidence that those potential encounters went beyond just glances?
Well, we do find hints in various sources.
Oh, really?
Yeah, from literature to philosophical dialogues.
Okay.
Suggesting that the palestra was kind of a hotbed for homosexual encounters.
Okay.
You know, imagine these spaces filled with attractive young men in the prime of their youth being observed and admired by older men.
Oh, yeah.
It's a recipe for attraction, courtship, and inevitably drama.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the palestra was like this microcosm of ancient Greek society.
Totally.
Where, you know, social norms and physicality and desire all just collided.
All came together.
Yeah. But we can't rely solely on written sources, right?
Right.
What about visual evidence?
Oh, we have that too, really.
Yeah.
Did they leave us any clues in their art?
Absolutely. And not just like subtle hints either.
Okay.
We're talking about those like vibrant ancient Greek vases.
Oh, yeah.
With their iconic red and black figures.
Yeah, those are awesome.
They're so cool. And they provide like a window into their world. And they depict various aspects of same-sex relationships. Oh, yeah. From courtship rituals to, well, let's just say.
To more intimate moments.
More intimate moments.
Wow. So they weren't shying away from depicting that in their art.
Not at all.
That's pretty bold for ancient times.
It's very bold.
Yeah. So what kind of specific details should we be looking for in these vase paintings?
Well, one interesting detail is the frequent depiction of intercrural copulation. Hold on.
Yeah.
Intercrural copulation.
Yes.
You had to break that one down for me.
You're right. That is a pretty technical term.
Yeah.
In simpler terms, it refers to the man's penis being inserted between the thighs of the younger partner.
Okay, so maybe not your typical romantic scene.
Not exactly candlelight and roses.
Not exactly, no.
Yeah.
It seems like even within homosexual relationships, there were specific norms and preferences.
Totally.
And tell me about those gifts.
Oh, yes, the gifts.
Mentioned.
So gift giving played a really significant role in these relationships.
Okay.
And we're not talking about just any old presents here.
Right.
The vase paintings actually show recurring symbols like cockerels.
Cockerels.
Yes, cockerels, hares, and foxes being presented as gifts from men to youths.
What was the thought behind giving a rooster as a romantic gift?
Well, I mean, think about it.
Okay.
What do cockerels represent? Aggression, virility, a certain boldness.
Okay.
So it's fascinating how these gifts seem to have carried a deeper, like, symbolic meaning beyond just their material value.
So they were trying to convey a message.
Exactly.
About their intentions.
Yes, about their intentions.
And the nature of the relationship.
And the nature of the relationship, exactly.
It makes you wonder if there were any awkward moments when a gift was misinterpreted.
Oh, I'm sure there were.
Yeah.
Plenty of awkward moments.
But moving on from symbolic birds.
Yeah, sure.
You mentioned that Greek literature and poetry also shed some light on these relationships.
They do, yes.
So what kind of insights can we glean from the written word?
Well, literature and poetry offer a treasure trove of information.
Okay.
We can look at a fragment from Sappho's poetry.
Sappho.
Yeah, Sappho.
The legendary poet.
A legendary poet.
Yeah.
Where she describes her intense emotional and physical response to a woman.
Okay.
It's a really powerful expression of desire and longing.
Yeah.
And it gives us a glimpse into the spectrum of human experience in ancient Greece.
But her work is so fragmented. How can we be sure about the nature of her relationships from just a few lines of poetry?
Yeah, that's a really valid point.
Yeah.
Interpreting Sappho's work is always a challenge, and there's ongoing debate about her relationships with women.
Right.
But even in those fragments, we see raw emotion and a depth of feeling that transcends time.
Yeah.
They remind us that the human heart, with its capacity for love and longing, hasn't changed all that much over the centuries.
Like each fragment is a piece of a puzzle.
Yeah.
We're trying to reconstruct
a
picture of her life.
A picture of her life and her world.
And her world.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, when we talk about ancient Greece,
yeah,
it's important to remember that it wasn't a monolithic culture.
Right, exactly.
There were regional variations, right?
Absolutely.
Like what about places like Crete and Sparta?
Yes.
Known for their warrior cultures. Were their social norms surrounding homosexuality different?
You're absolutely right. It wasn't a one-size-fits-all situation. Plato, in his work Laws, suggests that Crete and Sparta had unique customs surrounding homosexuality.
Interesting.
And Aristotle even theorized that in Crete, intercourse with males might have served as a form of population control.
Population control?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's a very
unexpected perspective.
It is.
But can we really rely on these sources for an accurate picture of what was going on?
It's crucial to acknowledge that reconstructing historical practices based on limited sources is a tricky business.
Yeah, for sure.
We have conflicting evidence. Myths often intertwine with reality.
Yeah.
But these theories, even if speculative, are still fascinating, and they highlight the diversity within ancient Greek society.
It reminds us that we shouldn't oversimplify history.
Exactly.
Even within what we consider a single culture.
Right.
There could be a wide range of
beliefs and practices.
Now let's tackle the big question that often comes up in discussions about homosexuality.
Yes.
Both ancient and modern. Did the Greeks consider it natural or unnatural?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And as you might expect, there's no easy answer.
Yeah.
We do have a passage from Isings, we discussed earlier, where he suggests that heterosexuality is natural, and that homosexuality is a transgression of gender roles.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Wasn't Aeschines the one defending his own homosexual relationships?
Yes.
That seems like a contradiction.
It does seem contradictory on the surface.
It does.
But remember, he was operating within a specific social and legal context.
Right.
So perhaps he felt the need to align himself with the prevailing norms of his time.
Right.
To bolster his defense.
Yeah, so it could have been a strategic move.
Exactly, rather than a heartfelt conviction.
A heartfelt conviction.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder what he truly believed.
Right, exactly.
Like what was really going on in his heart.
But you mentioned earlier that there's also evidence suggesting a more fluid understanding of sexuality in Greek society.
Right.
Can you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. So we find contrasting perspectives in other texts.
Okay.
The pseudo-Aristotelian Problemata, for example, discusses passive homosexuality as potentially arising from either nature or habituation.
So some people saw it as innate, while others attributed it to learned behavior.
Exactly.
It's amazing how these debates have echoed throughout history.
I know, it's fascinating.
And still resonate with us today. But if there was such a range of views, did any consensus emerge on this natural versus unnatural question?
That's what makes studying ancient Greece so captivating.
Yeah.
It's not a neat and tidy story with a clear-cut ending.
Right.
It challenges us to embrace, the messiness of history.
Yeah.
And to recognize that human beliefs and practices have always existed on a spectrum.
And this whole discussion about natural versus unnatural leads to a bigger question.
It does, yeah.
Like how much of what we consider natural is really just a product of our own cultural conditioning.
Totally.
I don't know.
And the baggage that we carry from our own upbringing and our own time period.
The ancient Greeks didn't necessarily impose those categories on themselves the way we do today.
It's true.
And it's really interesting.
Well, think about that.
It's a powerful reminder that the lens through which we view the past and even our present is always shaped by our own preconceptions.
Yeah.
The ancient Greeks, despite their emphasis on, reason and order, didn't have a single unified perspective on what was natural when it came to sexuality.
Yeah.
And perhaps that's a valuable lesson for us today.
It's like we're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
Exactly.
By imposing our modern ideas onto this culture that had a very different way of seeing the world.
A completely different worldview.
Yeah. But this deep dive has been anything but simple.
Oh, yeah.
We've seen how the Greeks had a whole spectrum of views on homosexuality.
Yeah.
From those who saw it as perfectly natural to those who considered it a transgression.
Exactly.
And we've even encountered individuals like ice kings.
Yeah, ice kings is a great example.
Who seem to embody that internal conflict themselves.
Of how complex and contradictory human beings can be.
Yeah.
I mean, he defends his own same-sex relationships while also making statements that seem to totally contradict those very experiences.
Yeah.
It's just a reminder that history is full of these, like, fascinating contradictions.
And that even historical figures were just people trying to navigate their lives and make sense of the world around them, just like us.
Just like us.
So for our listener out there who's been on this journey with us, what would you say is like the biggest takeaway from this deep dive?
You know, I think the biggest takeaway is the importance of critical thinking.
Yeah.
You know, we need to be willing to question the assumptions and categories that we often take for granted.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to topics like sexuality, you know, the ancient Greeks with their diverse range of beliefs and practices remind us that there's rarely a single right answer.
Right.
And that embracing complexity can lead to a much richer understanding of the human experience.
It's a reminder to approach history.
Yes.
And indeed our own lives with a sense of curiosity.
Totally.
And an open mind.
Yeah.
Who are we to define what's natural?
Right, exactly.
When even the ancient Greeks, who valued reason and logic so highly, couldn't come to a single conclusion.
Couldn't agree.
So that's all for our deep dive into the world of ancient Greek homosexuality.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us on this journey of discovery.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Until next time.
Yeah.
Keep those minds curious and those perspectives open.
Absolutely.